Now I've been talking about doing a snail video a couple times, and today is that day.
Now I've had shrimp and snails together for quite a long time, and I'll start with Malaysian trumpet snails. And I like to use these right after my tank is cycled. So when I first set up a tank and I think it's cycled, ready to put shrimp in, I'll usually put about 10 to 15 Malaysian trumpet snails in there. And the reason why I do this is because they always produce a high amount of bioload. And when you first cycle a tank, if you're not using an existing filter and it's just a brand new filter, most of the time the bioload isn't going to be that much when you first add shrimp. And so snails will provide that bioload that my filter needs to keep the tank stable. And another thing that they do is that they actually bury themselves into the substrate. And sometimes you don't even know how many Malaysian trumpet snails you have because most of them are going to be underneath. And what they're doing under there is they're eating food that gets left behind or just falls underneath the substrate. Now this is good so you don't have a lot of buildup underneath. And if you have a thick substrate, what this can cause is a gas pocket. And since they're underneath the substrate and they're moving it around, it prevents the chances of gas pocket buildup. And those can be kind of devastating to a tank. I've heard of people losing entire colonies from a giant gas pocket getting released. And one of the best things that I noticed that these snails do is that they turn the substrate. And when they're turning the substrate, I'll notice that all of my shrimp will follow Malaysian trumpet snails around and eat the biofilm of the moved substrate that the Malaysian trumpet snails cause. And when it comes to plants, I will notice that Malaysian trumpet snails almost act like earthworms in a garden. When they turn the substrates, the roots of the plants like it, and my plants seem to grow a little bit better when I put Malaysian trumpet snails in than without. Now, on to ram's horn. Now, I like to call these guys my above substrate cleanup crew. And what I mean by that is sometimes I don't have, hours of time to sit and watch my shrimp eat an entire feeding of food. And if my colonies are growing, I like to throw in an extra pellet every now and then. And sometimes the shrimp don't need it. Now what happens is that these snails will come and they'll eat that food and it just causes them to reproduce a little bit faster. And this can get out of control, and I've noticed that if your snail population is too high, they will compete for food with shrimp. I noticed that the ram's horn especially will surround the food to the point to where my shrimp are like, please get out of the way, I would like some food. And then the shrimp end up having to leave because they just don't have access to it. Now, as far as water parameters go for these snails, I noticed that they do a lot better in my neocaridina tanks rather than my caridina tanks. And the reason behind this is that their shells need quite a bit of minerals to stay healthy. And in my caridina tanks, my KH is 0 and my GH is 5, and the pH is around a 6. Now this isn't ideal for snails. I've tried numerous times to keep them in my caridina tanks, and the results are almost always the same. They'll last about a month or two, and then once their shells get thin, they'll just end up dying on me. Now in my neo tanks, my KH is around a 4, and my GH is around an 8 or a 9. Now, this still isn't ideal for snails. They even like more minerals than that. And that's the reason why I'm going to go ahead and take some of my snails and I'm going to make a snail only tank. And I'm going to see the difference for myself, what more minerals causes their shells to do. And I've watched a few videos and I've noticed that the more mineral content that they have, the brighter and more healthy their shells will be. Now, one of the downsides to ram's horn especially is they will leave snail eggs almost everywhere, all over everything. And it can get to be a little bit of an eyesore, but I feel like their pros far outweigh the cons. And I'm not really that into aquascaping. Like I like my tanks to look pretty, but I also like my colonies to breed just as good as they can. Now I am looking into getting one more snail, and that is a rabbit snail. I've loved these forever. I think they're probably the most cool looking snail I've ever researched. But they like to have a little warmer water than I have in any of my tanks down here. So I'm going to wait until I get some Sulawesi shrimp. I hope I didn't butcher that name. Because I find that those two have just about identical water parameters. And I don't know when exactly I'm going to set this up, but it's definitely going to happen in the near future. Now, once again, if you're not subscribed, if you could please subscribe, that would be pretty awesome. And give it a thumbs up. And I want to wish everybody a wonderful day, and cheers.